What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Jeff. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and and boy, do we have a special guest, my main man, the doctor himself, Dr. Jeff Spencer, is in the house. Mr. Jeff Spencer, so pumped to have you here.
Well, back at you times1000.com. Got to tell you, my brother, so good to see you.
Oh, man. I'm so pumped. I got to spend an hour with Dr. Jeff right now. This is like a favorite hour of my life. So,
well, back at you, man. You just hogged my line. Come on.
Oh, man. So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll get popping here. Does that work for you?
Good. Yep.
Cool. So listen, for listeners who are new to the show, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. People are living their passions, and those are creating greatness in the world and doing so despite the odds. And my main man, Dr. Jeff Spencer, is neither short of passion nor greatness, nor like doing so despite the odds. I mean, your story is such a cool story. And so we're going to go a little bit deep in that in just a second. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about how you and I know one another. And so first and foremost, listeners, there is a previous episode. I'm going to put it in the show notes if you want to hear our first episode. But I actually met Dr. Jeff through a podcast. He was, this was about 3 years ago. It was like deep in the heart of COVID. And I got up really early one morning and I was drinking coffee and listening to a Jim Quick podcast on what was then called, I think, Champions Blueprint, and now has a different name, Champions Ladder, or you've redesigned it a bit as things have morphed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta meet this guy. Now, right then and there, I was just getting ready to program our MIT Gathering of Titans. And so I was like, man, I'm going to use this thing I got in my back pocket here. I'm going to try to get introduced to some badasses. And Dr. Jeff, who was and I'll talk to you about all your many accolades in just a second, but former Olympian, worked with tons of Olympians and business folks, the household names. I was like, I really want to meet this guy. So I reach out to Jeff on LinkedIn, and to my surprise, he responded. And that was like the first step and then we got on a call and had a great conversation. Fast forward to a few months later, Jeff ends up being my coach, comes to my MIT event, ends up coaching my entire mastermind last year, and we become good friends. And I mean, I'm a person that, being a former athlete, I always, I got a couple coaches in my life, and so I'm going to call Dr. Jeff coach from the rest of this episode because he's my coach. And once you're someone's coach, in my book, you're always their coach. So that's how we know each other, man. I'm grateful to have you in my life. So thank you.
Back at you times 1000. We've never had a bad conversation, and thanks again for hosting such a gracious weekend a couple months back here. I just love the time that we spent on Lake Austin, and just the people that you attract and that surround you are just beyond exceptional.
Well, it was exceptional, and then what made it extra exceptional was that I somehow twisted Jeff's arm. He's easy arm to twist though, because he likes to do things for people he loves, and so
that's a condition though. By the way.
Yeah. I chose my words very carefely though, just so we're clear. Well like done. I got to assume, behind that really soft smile is a freaking beast. Yeah, so I would never want to see the dark side of Jeff Spencer.
It's not pretty.
At all. Yeah, mine either. Mine, I'm good until I'm not. And then it's like, too bad for you. So yeah, it was really cool. So I ended up bringing Coach into really coach my group. I had, I was working with about a dozen CEOs last year in a mastermind. And I said, man, I have a really cool opportunity. And I asked Jeff if he would come and really work with all these CEOs for a weekend. These guys had been with me for about 9-10 months at that point, and this is our second in-person event that we had, and they were like, they all at that point knew that I'm only like, if I'm going to spend my time, I'm going to spend it well, And so I think they had high expectations coming in. So it's always fun when people have high expectations coming in and then you blow their fucking mind. Then because and that's what happened. They were like, I mean, I saw people's lives changing in that room that weekend, and that was all because of the work that you do, and you changed my life. I mean, that's for sure. You've made me a better human being, and so I always like to share the things I learned with everyone around me, because I feel like that's like one of the reasons we're put on this planet. So yeah, man, a lot of gratitude for me having you come out here and getting to spend time with you.
Yep.
So I want to give a little bit of your formal bio. I'm not going to belabor it too much. You can fill in the gaps, because it would be like kind of obnoxious if I just went over all of the awesome things you've done. But so Dr. Jeff Spencer is just, dude, I call him coach, speaker, author, coach, really like a performance badass. Wrote the book, an author of How Not to Blow It Right Before You Win. Really, you're a former Olympian. You've worked with world champions, Olympians. You were one of the coaches on the Tour de France, and so you worked on 9 Tour de France's. I mentioned Olympian already. Awarded the International Sports Chiropractor of the Year, master's degree in sports medicine from USC. Creator of the Champions Ladder, amongst many other frameworks that some of the top minds in the world are using, and just an all-around amazing human being who I love so much. So thanks for coming back on the show, Jeff. I'm so pumped to get to hang.
You got it, man.
5 minutes, 57 seconds of me just telling Jeff how much I love him. So
never enough, man. It's never enough.
you know, it's funny. Like I'm a human being where I'm like, you tell me anything, you can pour accolades on me all day long. I will just like, I don't get embarrassed. I'm like, oh, you keep it coming. Keep it coming.
It's great, man.
So, you know, I'd love for you, if you don't mind, like kind of take a step back for audience. It's like, man, why Darius is gushing over here. What like, give kind of some of the origin story, some of your background. You know, I know you didn't wake up one day and just say, oh, I'm in the Olympics. Oh, I'm on 9 Tour de France. Oh, I'm working with Lance Armstrong. Oh, I'm working with Branson. Like, give us kind of the background on what got you to where you're at right now.
I think the most important thing here is, you know, when I was 7, I was called to entertain the idea of becoming an Olympian. I thought that'd be the coolest thing ever. But that was a moment that I remember where I saw something was sort of distinctly different between me and the way most people do it. You know, most people chase dreams, but, you know, I don't really chase dreams. What I do, I answer callings. And when something presents itself, it kind of has a certain gravity that I'm certainly aware of. And if I feel like there's enough gravity, then I start to trust the fact that this may be something that I should consider pursuing, which is different than pursuing anything just out of my own sheer interest or for whatever reason. And I found that that prescription has worked very well for me throughout my entire life. I found that it takes a lot less energy to stand in receivership of being, you know, gifted with the possibility, rather than looking under every rock and chasing all these possibilities that take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and oftentimes can lead to just tremendous amounts of frustration that drain us of our energy, enthusiasm, belief, aspirations, hope in the future, etc. So that was the first sign that something was uniquely different here. And I didn't know how I was going to become an Olympian, but I just kind of knew that I was called to it. And I found cycling through a unlikely bicycle ride that I took with some experienced riders in my neighborhood. And it's a 25-mile bike ride. I borrowed a bike, and I was 8 years younger than the youngest guy in the group. And when we got back from the ride, I wasn't tired and everybody else was. So there was sort of an indication, you know, there's something weird about this math on this. And so it became obvious, and people trusted in me, and they put a lot of time and effort into the development of myself as a cyclist. And one other kind of calling item that kind of confirmed it was I was working in a bike shop, and at that time more as a mascot than a mechanic. And a guy came in wearing a T-shirt that said USA Olympic Team on it. And I wanted that T-shirt when I saw it. It's like, I need to have that T-shirt. I want it. And the only way you could get it, because there was no online store at that time, you had to become an Olympian. So I went home and I got out of my box of crayons, or a triple-decker box of crayons, and I got a thick piece of paper, and I draw my plan. And the logo for becoming Olympian was a T-shirt the guy was wearing. And my plan was really simple. You know, it was be brave, work hard, don't make any excuses. And I gave myself 10 years. And so 10 years later, I did become an Olympian. But there are some important reasons why I did. Number one, my coach, who invited me to train with him and his group was Olympic gold medalists and world champions. And he invited me to come train with him, and I was 13. And he said to me, Jeff, first off, you need to know that winning is not an accident. It's deliberate, and it has a lot less to do with will and talent, but winning is a learned skill, is what he said to me. And he said that I want you to be around the altitude of conversation that we have as our training group, because if you have it within you to become a champion or an Olympian, this conversation will awaken that which is already in you. I can't put anything into you that you don't already have. I showed up, I did my job, I could participate mentally in every conversation they had. I took that on because there was a resonance of certainty about what they were saying that was compatible with who I was discovering myself to be. And that was one of the pivotal actions that led to this sort of connection of being a receivership, answering the call, not getting overly ambitious, wasting a lot of time going down cul-de-sacs, so on and so forth. And, lucky for me, 10 years later, I did become an Olympian, and one of the most important experiences of my entire life for a variety of different reasons. So that's how that got started. And then when I was training for the Olympics, I was between my sophomore and junior year at USC, where I was studying sports science, which was obviously a logical connection to what I was doing. And what's important there is that I learned the biology and physiology of what it takes physically to get to your top and stay there, two parts to it. And that's an absolute necessary requirement if you're going to become a prolific achiever and manifester of legacy. You have to know how to push. You have to know how to stay in the game so that you can pace yourself without blowing yourself up. So those two things worked really well together. And when I graduated with my master's degree, athletes came to me, thought, well, you must know something about winning gold medals because you're an Olympian and you know all the academics of what it takes from a physical, biologic, and physiology perspective to become and remain a prolific achiever. So they came to me. I've helped a bunch of athletes win gold medals, maybe 40 plus. I lost count a long time ago. And then business people came to me and they wanted to become their own champions. And whether it's boardroom, locker room, it's the same stuff. Either there are technical differences. The process of being a consistent performer that wins consistently, predictably, and repeatedly is essentially the same. And so I was working with my clients from the business world. I was working with my athletes from the athletic world. Everybody was winning their game. But a couple of things happened here is that the athlete said, I need to extend my career. That's my occupational career insurance policy. I need to limit the risk of injury and I need to recover from it quickly if I do get injured. And the business people said, well, look, I don't want to die young with heart attacks or strokes like my same age counterparts are having in their late 30s and early 40s. I decided to go back to school, having been out of graduate school for 10 years. I got my chiropractic licensure to be a primary healthcare provider so I could provide the athletes with injury management, prevention, and care, and the business people dealing with them on their wellness processes and their general health and fitness management. And so I became like this tripod. The first leg of the tripod was I was an Olympian. I know how to win. You can't interview people and read books on the Olympics and know how to win. It has to be part of your DNA constitution. And I had that, plus the experience. You have to understand the body. You got to push when you got to push. You got to be able to stay in the game to manifest your highest potential. I knew the academics of that very well. And then with the chiropractic side of it, I knew how to get and keep people well and help the athletes remain healthy. So with that, I was actually doing the job of 10 different professionals, and people saw that, hey, we don't need 10 different professionals that don't talk to each other, that are giving me things that are impossible to integrate in totality. I can go to Jeff and he knows how much of what I need to do for myself on a personal basis to be able to get the optimization of me as a human producer to be able to, again, amass the most significant number of personal successes and create a great legacy and live a great life. So that's how I got into the rarefied air, some of the household names that you mentioned, because they're busy people. They don't want their lives to be cluttered with too many people that they're talking with. They want to get stuff done. They want to showcase the best of what they got. So they saw in me another very important element in this is that I'm used to running at the highest level possible in situations that carry very high significance in terms of return and loss and opportunity and failure. And I have that as my best asset. So that's how I got into the very high world of advising the people in the high performance world. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I'm still in the game. I love the game. I love people developing confidence in their certainty and their ability to manifest their biggest goals and highest ambitions.
Thank you for sharing that. Going back to the beginning part, which honestly, do you believe that everyone has a calling and that most people ignore their callings? What are your thoughts on that?
I do, or I think, yeah, they ignore them, or they doubt them, or they doubt the value of them. I mean, there's all sorts of ways of looking at it, but I feel like common uh, the common wisdom way of looking at things is that you have to bury your head, you have to work your ass off, you can't let anybody outwork you. You have to believe that you're going to win, and you need to just keep believing, 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 and working harder and harder and harder, and getting a more detailed plan. And eventually, you'll find your way into the winner's circle. And I know that that's not exactly true, or if it is true, you're not going to have many successes, and it's going to take a lot of substance out of you to be able to get there. And so, the idea of standing in receivership, where you're purposely kind of petitioning for the opportunities to show up, and that you promise to give everything a look for the merits of what it could be offering, then all of a sudden things start showing up. But rather than chasing it, it's coming to you. So it's kind of like energy positive, not energy consumptive. And so when that happens, it's a free gift that comes. There's lots of opportunities that come that teach you how truth speaks to us and how opportunities show up. But I feel a lot of people disregard that, or they don't believe it, because that's not the common narrative. Common narrative in the math equation: want it bad enough, believe, work hard, don't give up, and you're going to get to the promised land, because you can achieve anything that you set out to achieve. And I know that that sounds good and everything, but that's not exactly how it works. There's lots of people with high ambition to be certain things that don't end up going anywhere. And a lot of there's a mismatch between what their potential is. Number one, there can be a mismanaged program of how you get from point A to point B. There can be mindset things that we have that aren't exactly true, that seem true, that talk us out of our belief in self, and that can occur. There's a whole myriad of things that I've found that get in the way.
What so I'm gonna talk about myself right now, because I think that listeners kind of hear me talk about certain parts of my life a lot, and I, having been a client of yours, you being my coach for a few months directly, where we were working on one specific issue, and the issue was really that I had just left my business, that I didn't know how I wanted to really move on to the next thing, and I didn't know how to do it, and so we started working together. And what's funny is that this is what, beginning of 21 when we did that, so it's 2 years ago, and my life has exponentially, like, I said this, I think I said this before the show, or maybe like early in the show. I think it was before the show. I said I've never been better in my life,
Right.
as a human. I've never had more of a clear head. I've never been more ready to perform, and I was not in a great place when we first started, and so I had kind of a midlife crisis, if you will, and where I've landed now, and one of your learnings I had from you is this idea of cul-de-sacs, being careful of risk mitigation around kind of putting myself out there and in the wrong way, which I think that when you're younger, and it's funny, I was talking to these 22-year-olds at a party not too long ago, and I told them, I said, your 20s are for risk taking. You can go you should take crazy risks. You should, because like your upside is so high and your downside so low. Like, if you get it wrong, no one cares. I mean, obviously there's some measured risk, like, depending on what we're talking about. You don't want to have kids when you're 20, because then that saddles your ability to take other risks. But not that there's anything wrong with that, but it will come at a cost of being able to take the type of risks I want to take, which are professional risks or physical risks if you're an athlete or something like that. And so where I've landed after a lot of the work we did, plus me kind of going down a couple other rabbit holes, was this idea of, what are you called to do? That's why I asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and the part that I really struggled with, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is I'm a person that was white knuckled it. I'm a person that's like, I'll just outwork everybody. Fuck everybody else. I'll go work 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, sleep, I'll put in a 100-hour week, and then I'll sleep all day Sunday, and I'll get up and do it again. And I'm just going to like grind it out, and I've been called a grinder, and I used to wear that as a badge of honor. And now I don't look at it that way. I'm like, when I get called a grinder now, I'm like, I don't like that title. I don't think it actually is what I want to be. And the reason for that is because I grinded until I hit rock bottom and realized that I could not outwork to create the outcomes I wanted. There was not a correlation between me working harder and getting what I wanted. And where I'm at right now, and there's a long-winded way of me asking my question, is I don't have any goals anymore, Jeff. I have light goals, but they're not the goals I had before. In the past, I would have these big audacious goals, and now I don't have goals anymore in the traditional sense of like, oh, I want to make $100 million or become a billionaire, or I want to, have the world's biggest podcast. It'd be great if all those things happen, that like great. Hopefully those things happen, because why wouldn't you want those things to happen? My new idea is this: who do I want to be, right? And I've come to the conclusion that I want to be a creator that creates impact in the world. I want to be a great father and husband, and I want to be super healthy human. And then all I do is every day is show up and say, what do I need to do today to make those things happen? And that's my goal now. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because that paradigm, that framework, the minute I kind of flipped that on its head, this is a pretty recent thing. We haven't talked about this. The minute I flipped that on its head, and now it's just like, well, I know what I want to be. That's never going to change. All those things will be consistent till the day I die, more than likely. Now it's, how do I show up every single day? What work do I have to do today? What are the 3 things I got to do in those areas to make those things be more true than they were yesterday? What are your thoughts on that from a performance standpoint?
Well, I think number one, your path was 100% predictable. And I don't think that you could have got to where you are without having gone through that period where you tried it your way. Because if we don't try it our way, then we always feel like, well, I should have tried it my way because maybe I would have gotten here sooner. You have to try your way against the common wisdom. I call it common wisdom, that wisdom of the herd that all thinks in a certain way that has never proven itself necessarily to be true. But it's hard to trust that because it goes opposite of what our human instincts tell us about what it takes to get to the winner's circle. Our human nature, our fear-based biology tells us a story, and it does sound right that if you want to get to where you want to get to, you got to mow everything down to get there. Otherwise, how are you supposed to get there? But when we really look at what that is through the eyes of our own experience, we realize at a certain point that's not necessarily true. But we don't know that until we've exhausted the mythology of that to realize that this can't be right. And I know that I cannot continue to engage my life and place my hope on this type of a model and system because I'm continuously fatigued. I'm not making really good choices. I don't like the way that I have neglected my relationships and my health. I can see that my family is still waiting for me to answer the promise on once we get there, I'm going to change. That hasn't happened in 10, 15, 20 years. And we get to a point where we realize that this is not workable. And then we start asking a different set of questions. And I've never seen anybody not experience what you have experienced, but we have to also give ourselves slack for being able to follow the path that we see as appropriate, even though history tells us it's not going to work out for us. We can't believe that. We only believe it once we've experienced the futility of it. And at that point, that's when the changes can be made. And to kind of explain it in explicit numbers, like you're sharing it with me, that's at the earliest, the early 30s or the late 30s, at the very earliest. And it's more likely that it's going to be a little bit after 40, maybe 43, 44, maybe 45, maybe a little bit late, but that's the zone where you see that futility of the way that I did it is no longer working. And, or, you know what, I'm going to blow. I cannot keep this up any longer. There's not enough time and energy in space in this dimension for me to do anything more than I've already done. And I'm currently exhausted. It's not possible. I don't know what the answer is, but this path is absolutely not doable. And at that point, then there's generally a pause where we kind of ask a deeper set of questions that put us in a state of petitioning for answers to these questions that we've never previously asked. And then usually when that happens, then it's like you have to rest up to be more prepared to receive and take action on things that are revealed to you. If you blow yourself up, you're no good to anybody. If you have a tired brain, you make more mental errors than other people. It's just not worth it. So, your conversion here is completely predictable because you're not going to do that before you try it your own way. Because in the 30s, pretty much you kind of think you know everything. You have a lot of successes. And we're talking about high achievers, of course, they're not your average person, but there's high achieving. I can conquer anything. I have some measurable current successes. This is an indication that I can go for more. I have the bigger ambitions. I want to create the business of the future now, and I can do this. I just need to keep moving. And we realize at a certain point that it doesn't work. So you've shared with us a really important lesson about what the progression looks like. And you've also discovered through your experience that being in receivership and not pressing so hard, it doesn't reduce your productivity or your scope of vision or belief in yourself. It actually amplifies it. But it's hard to trust that until you've gone through the gauntlet and the self flogging of trying to do it our way, which is push harder, want more, bigger goals, mowing anything down, sleeping less, believing more, the usual list of recitals that we're encouraged by to be able to get to the promised land.
Yeah, I love. What's the way you say it? You say Hollywood lied to us.
They
Is
did,
that?
yeah. It's a complete lie. Yeah,
Yeah,
complete lie.
yeah,
It's like, wait a minute. Where's the finish line here on this?
yeah. That's not how the movie ends. The
That's
movie ends
right.
with the guy who works hard and then he gets the girl and wins the prize, right?
And I've got neither. What's the deal here, man? I want to talk to the producer who wrote this script.
Yeah,
So,
I love when you say that. Yeah, so that was kind of my realization. I mean,
it,
I think that I had that blow up moment at 41. That's when it happened.
it's totally predictable. 38 to 43 is generally the range for that. So if you came to me with that, I would say, you know what, Darius, it's okay. We anticipated this. You didn't. You thought it was going to be something different. But, as they say, nobody learns anything from history. So here you go. You had your lessons. The scar tissue isn't too bad. So let's come out for round 2 and let's make sure that we get it more right this time since we understand the process.
So selfishly, and I want to go back to your just for the audience in a second here on some of the people you've worked with and things you've learned along the way. But I'm going to be selfish right now because we haven't talked about this. And so here I am, the Darius 3.0. I was Darius 2.0 was when I was in the belly of the beast, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure my stuff out. Darius 3.0 is this like grounded, just showing up every day, doing my thing, not flogging myself, not like interested in the future, driven for the future, but like not focused just on this like artificial outcome, really focused on showing up to be who I'm supposed to be and being called to do that, and then feeling a really sense of serenity. I've never been into this much peace, had this much peace in my life ever, like not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do. So I was gonna say, like, when people find this moment and I do trust it, I'm like, it feels right? I'm listening to my body. What's next for folks once they kind of come to that realization that, hey, I'm gonna follow my calling, and I'm not gonna sit there and just try to kill myself to win the award. That the minute I win it, I'm gonna want a bigger award. Where I know I'm actually trying to show up to be the best version of the human Darius that's ever lived, and to live the most fulfilling life I'm ever living. And so what happens, what do you find happens to prolific achievers once they hit that moment? I don't know if this is common among prolific achievers. Is this a human condition? So I guess that's my first question. Is this a prolific achiever thing, or is this a human thing, or both?
All prolific achievers are humans first and prolific achievers second. So, I mean, this is universal to all humans. And part of the thing that you said here, which I think requires at least a comment from me on this, is that tranquility of being in where you are, but you're not really pressing. So I want to say something about this. Is that, I mean, quite honestly, all the goals that we have and the steps to the goals that we have, these are all estimations against the presumed reality that's not even here yet. And we know that 90% of what we think is going to happen in life never happens. So therefore, when we have a plan and we have steps to the plan, we should look at those as best estimations about what we think reality is going to be once we get there. But the honest truth is that maybe when you get to that place where you're ready to initiate that step, the context may have completely changed. And therefore, if you're going to maximize it, you have to adjust what you're going to do so it's specific to the current context in real time. So there's a bit of a mythology even attached to having long-term goals, because I think in certain instances, we're making assumptions that may not be true and hold up over time. And in the prolific achievers world, you're always adjusting to current reality, because when we adjust the current reality, then we're able to ride the best energetic way forward using the least energy to move towards our bigger future, in which you may also find, because you're holding space for this, because reality isn't in the projection, it's the reality of what happens at the moment that you get there. And there may actually be bigger goals that you haven't have considered that you've exempt yourself from because you'd rigidly adhered to the goal that you set out, because you're a person of your word. And once you commit to it, you don't deviate. I don't know anybody that would ever want to follow a person like that, because Again, we know that life never unfolds the way that you think it's going to. It never does. And 90% of what we prepare for never happens. So rather than play a good defense against probability, we should be playing a very soft, gentle offense that allows us to consistently probe, adjust trajectories, so on and so forth. And to do that creates a present reality in a place where we can exist in a certain level of tranquility of being and learn to trust over time that makes our life much less effortful, effortful, but it also shifts our confidence in our awareness where we kind of know that if kind of we follow this configuration, that it gives the universe, fate, providence, capital P, the chance to put something in front of us that we could never have come up with that ends up perhaps being our best work ever. But yet the only way we could see it was to remain in receivership and not be too hyper focused on getting done what we promised to ourselves that we would. Because a lot of that is driven by fear as well. And if
So
you're driven by fear, then the likelihood of it happening becomes almost non-existent.
what so to that point, one of the things that really stood out to me, which was when I reached out to you, is you were talking about, you know, how people win gold medals, how people win Olympic gold medals, and it was this idea that the champion does the work, right?
Yeah.
That they do their homework, that they
Right.
do the work, that they
Right.
show up and they practice and they do the work and they get the steps down, and that becomes like the second nature thing because they've done the work, so that when they show up to wherever the Olympics are that year or the World Championships or whatever, all they're doing, it's just another day doing the work.
That's
Right.
exactly right. And what you'll notice is that most people screw up when they get to that place in their life where they have an opportunity to transcend. They blow it every time. So much so that if people go to drjeffspencer.com, you go there, you can get a paper that I wrote called How Not to Blow It Just Before You Win. To me, that's such a ubiquitous phenomena that's anticipated. I just see this only like a million times a day where your chance comes, the brass ring comes around on the carousel, and you fumble the ball by doing something that you weren't prepared to do because you thought it was going to work and you had to be too perfect because you only get one shot at it. So you start changing stuff and you screw it up like every time. And I see this just like clockwork. So there's a level of discipline that has to be there because, again, winning is a learned behavior, is what it is. And if you understand where you are in the winning process and you know what the opportunities and risks are, then you can negotiate through that. You don't need to blow yourself up. But really, if you look at this, the general mantra is have a detailed plan, want it badly, work harder than anybody else, keep believing, and you're going to get to the promised land. And if you don't, well, then your goal is too small. You got to go for a bigger goal. That's like oftentimes the usual prescription, but it doesn't work like that. So I think first and foremost, we have to understand that winning is a learned behavior and there is a structure to it. And what that structure looks like, as you said, the champion's golden rule is do the homework and the test is easy. Meaning first you prepare, and once you're ready, then you step onto the playing field and you let your preparation execute what has to go right for you, and you're adjusting concurrently as you go. That's the fastest way to the winner's circle that I know of that has the least amount of risk attached to it.
So using that thought process and kind of going back to, again, myself, because I'm being selfish right now. If I, in my mind, what I heard you just say is like, hey, Darius, when you say you're going to show up, so every day I say, Darius, I'm not trying to create, let's get into a time machine. And Darius meets Dr. Jeff Spencer.
That's cool.
7 years ago, 2016. What do you want to do, Darius? I want to be famous. I want to build $1 billion company, and I want to be the best dad in the world. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have said that to you. I swear to God, I would have said it. I would have meant it.
Yeah, no doubt. I believe that.
And
totally predictable.
Right. And so, here I am 7 years later. I would say I'm a great dad. I don't know what the best dad in the world even looks like. That's probably a very subjective thing. I'm not running $1 billion company, and I don't think I'm famous. Right now, I don't even think I don't want any of those goals, by the way, except the best dad in the world. I want to be the best dad to my kids, right? Besides that. So here I am 7 years later, and like my goals are totally different. So my goal now is what I said earlier on the show, which is like have great relationships with people I love, show up to be a creator, to create impact in the world, and be the healthiest version of me that ever walked on this planet, right? So using this champions, formula that we're talking about, my answer to that is I have to show up every day and do work to create those things. And that's
Wow.
the goal. That has become the goal now. Is
Right.
just you have to show up and do the work, Darius, every day. Is
Yeah.
that, am I thinking of this the right way?
100%. Let me tell you the reason why that is that we have kind of two opposing mentalities that are at war with each other 24 hours a day for control over our decision making. And these are both biologically hardwired into it. We don't have any say in that. This is part of the human package, where the first part of our mindset or our mentality is the human mindset. It's set because it's rigid. And the human mindset, human because we're all born with it, we all have it. That is all about survival. It doesn't care about gold medals, doesn't care about your $100 billion company, it could care less about it. It's only about survival. And because it's about survival, both physically and psychologically, it gets first dibs at every moment, which makes sense because if we don't survive, then the higher aspirations don't matter because we're not going to get to them anyhow. So we have that biology built into us. And that's always our first response to every moment of our life. And if you look at survival, it is what? It's playing good defense. It's believing that you have to be perfect. It's thinking that your genes are what control your destiny. It's about being fear-free before taking action. Every one of those things that I just said to you is complete mythology. It's complete ultra garbage. It's the antithesis of what it takes to become a prolific achiever. But somehow we believe that to be true. Yeah, well, it is true when it's aligned with this idea of survival. But survival is not the prescription to be able to manifest a life of contribution, value, and legacy creation, because you can't get there through that. And so therefore that's automatic to us. That's free. That's living a natural life. If you want to live a natural life, that's fine. You just follow your impulses eternally and see how far you get. I can tell you exactly where it's going to lead. It's going to lead to a life of frustration. It's going to lead to a life of disbelief. It's going to lead to a life of abject mediocrity because it is not designed to take you to the promised land. But the good news is, but it does get first dibs at every moment. But the good news is we also have the champion's mind. Well, what do you mean mind? Mindset? Well, mindset is automatic. Mind is the brain, not just the brain, excuse me. The brain is part of it, but not the whole story. Is that the mind itself has the ability to thoughtfully and consciously consider information. It can store it, interpret it, route it, dissect it, collate it, transmit it. That's what the brain does. It's very deliberate and it makes conscious decisions against what history tells us to be true, that when applied will take us inch by inch towards the winner's circle. Now, if we're a person that comes from our reactive human mindset survival biology, it will seem like doing these things every day seems ridiculously absurd. Well, it would, because this operating system is incompatible with the way that most people think. So to your point, is that anything that's good in life never self-perpetuate. It has to be applied. Otherwise, your human survival side psychologically and physically is going to take over, and you're going to be making your decisions from that because it feels right. Well, it may feel right, but it may not be the prescription necessary to move forward. So you can see how that happens. And if you're told to take action on your first impulse, I'm not so sure that that's such a good idea, because if it's driven by survival, then it's not going to take you closer towards your goal. It isn't going to happen. So you've said it exactly correct. It seems like I got to get up every day and I need to apply it. Exactly right. If you don't apply it, then you don't retain it. The human mindset impulse towards mediocrity because of survival, that predominates and takes over. That's why most people don't change over time.
Do you think that, like, having worked with, I mean, you've really, I mean, can we talk about the list a little bit just for listeners that are like,
sure.
you know, like, I mean, you've worked with guys like Tiger Woods and Branson and Bono, and these are famous people, right? I know you've worked with like some really big people in business as well. But my question for you is, and this is just, you know, this is something more out of curiosity. I guess, especially if you're working with Olympians when they're young, or you worked with, you know, Lance Armstrong on 9 Tour de France's, right? Like he was in his 30s, 20s, you know, when he was doing that,
mid-20s.
Right. So I'm guessing he wasn't as evolved as what we're talking about because he hadn't yet turned 38, right? So right. A lot of these younger achievers or famous people, they're probably winning because of talent and ego is my guess. They're doing the same shit I did in my 20s and 30s, which was grind like fucking crazy to build, and their talents created these famous outcomes that they're rewarded in the public eye. Am I analyzing this properly or
yeah,
no?
You really are. And there's an important message in this, is that you can't get in there and screw that up, because that is my opinion, that is a time released way of looking at the world that is appropriate for a given segment of our development. And we can't believe that it can be any other way. We just think that because we believe it, then therefore it's true. That is absolutely not true. You look at yourself at 20 versus yourself at 45, you'll recognize there is an entirely different person there. I'm thinking differently. And everybody at that age kind of thinks similarly, meaning that it's a biologic activation. It's like a time release vitamin. We just don't look at it like that, So again, everything that you're saying is correct. And you're never going to talk a 20-year-old out of, and maybe you shouldn't even try to tell them what they're thinking. Well, you could tell them that it isn't correct. History doesn't prove what they're saying to be true, but they're not going to listen to that. They just think because I think it, therefore it is. So
is that why there was maybe why you saw Tiger's life blow up like the way it did?
Yeah,
or why we saw Lance's life blow up the way it did? Is this part of that blow up that you're talking about? That's like, you're going for the Hollywood ending. You're living the fast life. Listen, I can understand why anyone, especially if you're world famous like that, the world's your oyster. You can get anything you want, and that's probably not healthy if you're trying to create a fulfilled life.
But you don't know that at that age, and you're not even going to be thinking about that.
No,
all you want is the stuff, and you want to be able to demonstrate your worth as a human and your capacity to self-manifest. And the problem also is that the culture, society, and friends and family usually don't have enough early conversations about the possibility of the risks that are associated with this. I bet you very few people that play a big game that don't throw it away were ever talked to early enough, not given a lecture, but the risks inherent in the future were never brought up. For my daughter, I always said to her, her name is Ken, K-I-N. I said, listen, Ken, I need to talk to you about something. I'm not telling you what to do, and I don't expect you to understand what I'm saying, but I want to go on record as saying this, X, Y, Z. And when X, Y, Z shows up, we need to come back and we need to pick up this conversation so that you can find safe passage through this, pivotal life moment that you're going through. And she never thought, oh, Dad, you give me another lecture. It was never like that. And I'm sorry, I just don't see that. I just think the big push to the finish line, if you want it bad enough, it's going to happen. So the whole way that we go about the cultivation, when people are receptive to at least conversations where you can plant the seeds, I don't know that ever happens on a regular basis. I don't see it. I don't hear it. And I feel like that's a discredit, quite honestly, because it does set up people to have some very, very troubling personal experiences that they may never recover from, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And so moving forward to this framework, because obviously, you're a man who's lived on this planet long enough where you've seen enough
to learn something.
And you learn a couple things, right? And you and I could talk for 2 hours easy about right. But so one of my questions for you is, yeah, fine, like okay, well, everything you said like makes total sense, logical, right? You're a person.
It only makes logical sense to the champion. It doesn't make logical sense to the average person.
Because they're living from a fear-based reality.
Yeah. And so they just think there's another way of doing it. Want it bad enough, it'll manifest. Just try hard. You'll be able to penetrate the barrier. You'll be able to get to wherever you want to go. Yeah. It's almost too contrarian for people to accept it, quite honestly.
I'll tell you what, man, it took me a long time. It took me hitting, I swear to God, it took me, I had to hit rock bottom,
Yeah, you usually do. You got to try it your way, until you realize it doesn't work. Then you start asking a different set of questions.
Yeah, it's true. And I will say, being on the other side of it now, life's a hell of a lot better over here.
Totally, man. Probably would have thought that it was possible to start acting like your parents later,
You know what? What's funny? My parents lived fear-based lives.
No, so I know the history. So I sort of said that on behalf of people that didn't have your experience. So
yeah. I watched people be immigrant experience, fearful about losing everything all the time. And I had to pull that imprint off.
Yeah. You did a great job too.
Thank you. Yeah. Because being on the other side of it, it's funny. My experience was I would hear people say stuff like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I was like, fuck those people. Like, yeah, well, it would really piss me off.
Yeah.
I was just like, what does that even mean? And you know what? I get it now. It means you got to show up every day to put in the work to be who you want to be.
Correct.
And that's how I interpret it. But I'd love to hear, like, let's talk about the Champions Ladder. Let's pivot over there because you've been able to take these learnings and take these experiences working with, I mean, literally 9 Tour de France's. And for anyone that doesn't know what that means, go watch like a 15-minute documentary on the Tour de France. That is fucking brutal,
To say the least.
I mean, I didn't even understand how brutal it was till you and I started working together, and I did some research on it. But seeing, the stories you've told me about Bono and Lance and all these guys, you really have worked with the best of the best as far as people that are performing on the world stage in front of millions and millions of people to try to create extraordinary outcomes. Does that mean that they're the most evolved human being? Maybe, maybe not. But it does mean that they have to perform to create something amazing. Correct. And so I know you've garnered a lot of knowledge from working with those folks and helping them reach those goals. Take us through the Champions Ladder, because I think that that's a really important thing for our listeners to learn a little bit about. What is it? How did you come up with it? And how might they start thinking about, if they want to learn more about it, how they might apply that to their lives?
Well, as I mentioned earlier here, life is a verb, it's not a noun. And there has to be, whatever we choose to do will determine directly what the amount of success that we will have in life. And so I'm a bit of a voyeur of the human experience, and having been buried for decades within the bowels of some of the most prolific achievers of our era, and being part of the advisory to how do we craft and tease out the best of this and how do we maintain it, what the observation was is that there's 5 different core competencies, meaning we have to be competent in 5 areas. And when we talk about full potential, at any point in time, we all have a full potential, but that full potential morphs and evolves over lifetime, where we kind of never finish the job, or we can put it on cruise control. So the 5 areas that I'm going to be sharing with you right now have to be concurrently developed simultaneously with each other, because these 5 elements work together in a system. And when we have the synergistic elements that make up the system, when they're synergistic, it creates an exponential output capacity. So rung number 1 on the Champions Ladder is you have to have a champion's mind. Because if you don't have the capacity to consciously consider and thoughtfully look at data and information and call up from your library what play to call that will advance the ball down the field based upon history, then you're at serious risk for maybe taking 10 years to get to a place that may take you 10 months. You have to be able to think smart and make really good decisions under pressure without excess hesitation. You must have a champion's mind. That's rung 1. Rung 2 is you have to control your day. Because if you cannot control your day, you cannot control your life. And if you cannot control your life, then people don't trust you as a leader. You need people to help us, because no one wins alone. If we can't control our day, we're incredibly energy inefficient. If we can't control our day, our productivity is in the toilet. We can't get anything done. You have to be able to control your day. Rung number 3 on the ladder is knowing how to win. The truth is that winning is a learned, deliberate skill. And playing and winning big is not an accident. It's a very deliberate outcome of very consistent things that are consistently done, that history has revealed to us when we do certain things in a certain order that can be described, that has been confirmed by history. Then we start to see, oh, so this just isn't a matter of trying harder or wanting it bad enough. There's actually a rhythm and a methodology to this, where I can actually say, well, I'm here. And because I'm here, well, this is what I do to move forward. So again, we must 100% be in a state of awareness and have the tools to know how to win. And for each of these, I've actually created a program that I use with my clients, and I also use in the events that I host. And let me just kind of go back here and say that the champion's mind that you must have, the program that I created for that is the human nature mentalities. And this is where we learn all about the champion's mindset, the human mindset versus the champion's mind. Program number 2, that's how to control your day. That program is called the Champion's Perfect Day. The program that goes on, Know How to Win, is called the Goal Achievement Roadmap, meaning that there's a process by which we can learn and apply that consistently, predictably, and repeatedly get us into the winner's circle. The fourth rung on the ladder is what's coming next. We have to be able to peek around the corner and see what's coming, because there's always a risk of being tripped up by a preventable problem, or our inability to seize an opportunity because we either weren't ready for it or we didn't see it. And therefore, there needs to be a mechanism in place that allows us to peer behind the veil and see what's in the invisible realm of the future. And there are some processes for that. The program that I've created for that is called the Life Lens Progression. And then the fifth rung on the ladder is carry momentum. Momentum is our most prized resource in today's physical world. And the more that we can maintain and hold our momentum moving forward, we can get to the finish line faster with least resource consumption. And the program for that is called stair-stepping. So these are 5 competencies that we absolutely must master enough for that particular lifespan development place that we're currently in, where together those parts act as a whole that allows an exponential output of results to be able to take place. That's the champion's ladder.
I love that, man. One of the things I wanted to, and I don't know if that's, I recall this as part of the Champions Ladder. Maybe I might be mixing up programs, but there's a part there, at least some of the work we did when you came out to Austin was kind of this like cycle, what happens when we try new things, right? When we go to build. And there was this part where it's like the honeymoon, and then like later on, it's like it's like the valley of despair, right? Where you're like, is that part of the Champions Ladder? Is that
that's actually rung number 4, which is know what's coming. Because if we look at what history tells us about what we should be anticipating in terms of our age, we can kind of call that out. Like I said to you earlier, when you were describing where you've been to get to the place where you are, I said, well, that's just completely predictable, because we know through human experience that everybody sort of goes through that, knowing that people can't outrun the biology of where they are. And so again, the value of that is that, as you've experienced, is that you're able to look back over history and see how you were thinking previously that wasn't correct, but you certainly thought it was. And so you can have compassion on those people that are making the same mistakes that they can't help themselves from making. And you can also intervene and offer some suggestions. They probably won't listen because they just think whatever I think is what it is. But you see that there's a rhythm and a biology and a time release side to this that's just put into our human nature. And so that would be the value of the Life Lens progression.
And so when folks are working through those rough patches, like let's say we start a new project, you go to do something hard, right? Because and I'll say this for anyone that's listening, and we'll plug where they can find you. But drjeffspencer.com, is that the best place? Is that where all things Dr. Jeff lives?
That's it's not an extensive website, but if there are people that have an honest inquiry that would like to explore the possibilities of their bigger future, you could just go there, and there's a place where you can apply for a conversation with me. You just need to fill out the application. That comes to me, and I take a look at it. And if I feel there's merit in us having a conversation, I'll get back to you, and we'll jump on a call together.
Yeah, because what I was going to say is, one of the things that I really like about your your life experience, and B, your ability, which is probably borderline genius on how to like deconstruct these different pieces, is it really does give you this like roadmap to like what's next, what's the plan I need to follow, what's going to happen, predictability, and using the predictability of like a new project, for example. So I'm talking about some of your work, as I'm doing a new project right now, and I'm like, all right, where it's exciting, we're in the honeymoon phase, I'm getting ready for it to suck, I'm just like, I refuse to get excited. I'm like, I'm not gonna get excited because it's gonna, like, I'm not gonna pretend like it's not gonna be easier. I know it's gonna be hard. And I have a business partner, and he's like, oh, I bet you this is gonna be easier than we think. And I'm like, I'm like, you're welcome to think that all you want. I'm gonna be the pessimist and know that this is gonna be harder than we think it is, and hopefully I get surprised.
Yeah,
right.
That's the way to look at it, man.
Yeah, it's okay, because when I show up and it's hard, I'll be like, yeah, I was expecting it to be hard.
It's supposed to be. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, so this is supposed to be hard. So since it is hard, great. It is what it's supposed to be, as opposed to, oh my God, I can't believe this is hard. Why did I think it was going to be so easy? I'm like, yeah, I'd rather get surprised to the upside.
Well, that just sort of speaks to the predictability of what we expect human nature to say in certain situations. That it sounds good, but it's terribly incorrect. Wouldn't it be a really good idea to know that in advance? So when the
Yeah.
stuff shows up, hey, we talked about it here. It's here. Well, what do? Well, we do what we talked about previously. We do X. And then, well, when do we get back to work? Well, when we see Y. So again,
Right.
if you don't know what's coming, then the blind side of the cosmic boomerang that's out in space and it comes back into orbit could take us out of the game, man. Doesn't have to.
Totally.
Doesn't have to.
No, I love it. Talk about the Champions Enclave, because I know that's a
Oh
project
yeah,
that you've
thanks.
gotten off the ground that's really interesting. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Well, one of the things that I've noticed here with deep conviction is that there's one thing to do one-on-one coaching, which is absolutely essential because you can get into the specific nicks and crannies of a person's personalized needs, but there also needs to be a community that we can get together with that plays at the same altitude that we do, so that we don't need to explain ourselves. We're inherently understood by the nature of the group. And so I've created two groups. One is the Champions Huddle. The other one is the Champions Enclave. And these are two groups of achievers. One are advanced achievers. One are achievers in the making, where people are hand selected by myself through application that I have to personally vet. And I select the people that I see have the best compatibility to show up and hold the conversation necessary and be the teammate necessary in the interactions that we have at the enclave or the huddle. It's an experiential way by which we explore and we experience what the champions world really is and what it takes for us to convert from being who we are to our greatest champion. And so those are groups from 8 to 12. It just depends on how I decide to elect who, and that's all done for, again, to ensure that the compatibility of performance is what it needs to be for the highest experience possible. If anybody is interested in those, you can certainly go to my website, www.drjeffspencer.com, and you can get on and you can apply to have a conversation with me about that. Would be happy to. Because I choose everything and it's by personal selection and invitation only, there's no website that you can go to. There's no place that you can go to sign up. You can't register any place. It's me. And so if you are drawn and called to have a conversation, please feel free to do that, because I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, listen, I'll give 2 thumbs up to that, and I'm trying to make it out to one of these events, so you might even get to hang out with moi. We get a little fun,
I
and if
can't
you think
wait,
I'm fun,
man.
if you think
Yeah.
I'm fun on the podcast, come hang out with me in person.
Oh man, it's like I don't know what size type you need to sort of explain it, or the exclamation point next to any experience with you. I got to tell you, everybody, it is so enriching because Darius has this artistic side, he has this creative side, but he has an incredibly discerning mind as well for seeing details and seeing things in a very unique way. If you ever get a chance to spend time with Darius, please take the time to do that, because he has such deep insights. Did I leave anything out, Darius? I should have.
No, that was the script. That was the script
I
I
just
gave
want to
you.
make sure that I was adherent to the script. Okay, good.
No, I'm actually just really fun, especially if you get a couple drinks with me. But I try to be fun either way. But yeah, no, the anyone that could spend time with you, Dr. Jeff, it's a gift to themselves, and
Thanks.
I've gotten the gift of spending a lot of time with you
Yeah,
in the short amount of time we've gotten to hang out. So it's been fun. Well, man, we have a new segment to the show, which is we always like to end the show, and we ask a question of all of our guests now, called the greatness question. So I'd love to end the show with that, because we're hitting up against time. I don't respect your schedule. So do you mind if I asked you our greatness question, and then
no,
we'll get
I'm
things wrapped up
curious.
here?
I'm curious.
All right. So here we go. So the greatness question is, what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
For sure, in me, it is, let me explain it. There are certain things in me that came so naturally to me that were bewildering in terms of their capacity for other people. But I thought, since it came so naturally to me, it was no big deal. And so I discounted it. I never really stepped into it. And I feel that I shortchanged myself a bit. And I also shortchanged other people, not coming from that space. And it wasn't by conscious omission. It's just that I didn't give my uniqueness the credit that it deserved to have. And if I could go back and have lived through what I knew to be true about myself and taken more ownership of it, I feel that I would have perhaps impacted more people. So I do share some regret about that, but simultaneously, I feel like I've learned from it. And in a certain sense, my best work is still in front of me.
Oh man, I love it. And your best work is by far and away in front of you, man. And you have a lot of great work behind you too. So
thanks for that.
It's really cool. Really cool to see. So, to connect with you, go to drjeffspencer.com. Anything else that people, if they want to learn more, or is that the best spot?
Well, I think that's it. There's an apply tab up there, and it will be an application to host the conversation and ask a few other questions, but just, you can fill that out in a way that works for you and send it off to me. Make sure you mentioned that you were on the podcast with Darius and myself, and I look forward to getting a chance to explore what your bigger future might look like. I would also say in closing here is that there's always room at the top for the best. It doesn't matter what's happening in the world. There's always room at the top for the best. And also to be mindful that there's only one of you in all of creation, and whatever your calling is, whatever your skills and assets are, when you build a life based on that, rather than comparing yourself against everybody else, and you start to live a life of value and contribution where your life becomes enriched and you have a much deeper sense of purpose. So just please be mindful that there's only one of you in all of creation. Thanks again, Darius, for the amazing conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff Spencer. Appreciate you, man. I love you, and love having you on the show, man. With that said, guys, share this with anyone that you know that wants to be a champion, wants to level up in their life. Leaders are givers, and we love to share things here at the Greatness Machine. With that said, until next time, peace out. We love you guys. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.